Material ledger in S4HANA is one of the complex topics, at least perceived so. And in this video, we will try to understand what is material ledger and how it is used in S4HANA, what are its functionalities, and how it is different than the ERP. This is a part of an entire series of videos which I am going to prepare on material ledger in S4HANA that covers parallel valuations and also actual costing. Though the series is going to take some considerable amount of time, but this is the very first video in that series. First, let us try to understand what is material ledger and let us address some misconceptions that people have around material ledger in S4HANA. So what is a material ledger? Material ledger is a tricky part. There is no specific definition even from SAP for this word or phrase material ledger. But we'll try to break it down a bit into material and ledger, and let us try to understand how this material ledger serves the purpose. So the word material refers to a goods or a service that is subject to transactions like purchases, sales, or production, etc. So every transaction on a material is having a value. It is a type of a transaction that we are performing. It has certain attributes, like for example, a profit center or a location or a sales organization, a plant, etc. that is assigned to that transaction. On the other side, the ledger is a record of the business transactions. These are very basic definitions that we have encountered and used in our day-to-day life on SAP. Now, if we try to put these two together and understand what is a material ledger, we can say that a material ledger is a subledger like an accounts receivables or an accounts payable or an asset accounting. So it is a type of a subledger that provides a detailed analysis of inventory transactions. Like the same way how a AR or an accounts receivable subledger provides on the sales part, on the AP subledger provides on the purchasing part, and the asset subledger provides transactions on the assets. Similarly, a material ledger is a subledger that provides a detailed analysis or kind of a record of transactions that are happening on the inventory. Now, what kind of a transactions can happen on the inventory? It can be a sale, it can be a purchase, it can be a production movement, or it can be an internal movement, it can be an intercompany, a stock transfer, it can be anything where a material is involved and it has a value. So any transaction that is done on a material will have a certain value or can have certain value, and that transaction is recorded on the material ledger. While we can say that material ledger is a subledger that provides the inventory transactions, there is much beyond that, because inventory or inventory management changes from company to company. It has a lot of dependency on the local legal regulations or how the company has determined or decided to do their inventory transactions. So in order to address all of these functionalities, we are also using material ledger. So material ledger is not just a mere ledger of inventory transactions, but it has various functionalities that are offered. So let us see those functionalities offered by material ledger in S4HANA. A material ledger has two main functionalities. One is actual costing and the other one is parallel valuation. And here is where there is a lot of misconception around the material ledger functionalities. Over the years, because of the material ledger behavior in the ERP system, there is a misconception that material ledger is used only for actual costing. But over the years, material ledger as a functionality offered by SAP has changed a lot. And when it comes to S4HANA, actual costing is just a functionality offered by material ledger, but material ledger is itself not actual costing. As we said, material ledger has two functionalities, actual costing and parallel valuation. We will address these functionalities in detail in the subsequent videos, but for now, these are the two functionalities that are offered by material ledger. So now that we said material ledger is a type of a subledger and it supports actual costing and parallel valuation, or in short, it is recording the inventory transactions, where exactly in the FICO module is this material ledger sitting? So FICO is again FI and CO. FI primarily deals with the external reporting and CO deals with the internal reporting. Now, the material ledger functionality falls under the product cost controlling area, which is a part of controlling module. So material ledger, we can safely say that is a part of a controlling functionality in the FICO module. But again, we said that material ledger also records certain transactions happening on the inventory. So it also has an impact on FI in terms of the GL documents that are posted along with the material ledger documents. Again, all this is theoretical. We are going to see it in detail in subsequent videos. But understand that material ledger as a functionality is falling under the CO area majority, and it also has an impact on the finance area of the FICO module. Now, we said that there have been a lot of misconceptions on material ledger, and that is the reason not many clients are actually implementing the material ledger functionality. But in S4, there have been a lot of changes as we discussed, and there have been a lot of advantages that the client can actually realize by implementing the material ledger functionalities. So we'll see it certain advantages of material ledger, especially in the S4HANA. So the first one is to evaluate inventory based on the actual cost. There has been already a video on this on the channel that whenever a product is costed by standard costing run, that is actually a assumption, but it is not the actual cost of that product. So in order to arrive at the actual cost, which might also include a lot of variances and on top of the standard cost, so that is actual costing. So material ledger helps to achieve that actual cost of that inventory. So that is a major advantage which many firms which are actually dealing with certain industries like oil and gas or heavy manufacturing, or some countries which are actually obliged by legal regulations, for example, Brazil or Turkey, where actual cost is mandate legal. So in those scenarios, material ledger as well as actual costing is also being implemented. But now that material ledger and actual costing functionality has been simplified in S4HANA, many other clients who are not obliged by the legal regulations are also able to implement material ledger and see the benefit of actual cost. The another advantage of material ledger is easy identification of intercompany profits. For example, whenever there is a movement of goods between two different company codes or two different plants which are falling under the same organization, then usually there is going to be a transfer price, which is a profit with intercompany transaction. And we do not want to see that profit at a group level. So in those cases, we want to eliminate the intercompany profits, and that is also possible by using material ledger. Because material ledger now holds all the transactions that are happening on the inventory, it is very easy or very much possible to identify the intercompany profits and eliminate those for group reporting. Now, when I talk about intercompany, I also mean about inter-profit center. So we can have a group valuation or we can have a profit center valuation, and we can eliminate the inter-organizational unit profits. When I mean organizational unit, it can be a company code or it can be a profit center. So we can eliminate those profit margins and we can arrive at the reporting at a group level. And the next one is the flexibility to view material costs in multiple currencies. So one of the functionalities that we have mentioned about material ledger, parallel valuation or parallel currencies. So we can see a material transaction happening in multiple currencies, which is very much useful in today's multi-world companies. So if you want to see a transaction happening in one particular currency, but also want to report it in another currency, then that is possible in material ledger. Material ledger supports 3 different currencies, and we can have transactions recorded in those currencies. Again, there is a catch. If we are also implementing parallel valuations, then the number of currencies slightly changes, which we will see in practical while we are doing the hands-on. But material ledger allows to have multiple currencies in a single transaction. Transparency of all material activities carried out within the period. Yes, because we are recording every transaction happening on that inventory, it is very much easy to have a record of all the material activities, and it gives us a lot of transparency in terms of reporting. Ability to set up and identify transfer price between profit centers. What we have discussed in the second point. In addition to intercompany profits, we can also eliminate inter-profit center profits. That means if we are moving a material from one profit center to another, or if we are trying to use a material belonging to one profit center in a production order belonging to another profit center, so all those profit margins can also be eliminated by which are arriving because of the transfer price between the profit centers. So sum of all these advantages, the one major advantage is reporting the true cost of sales. But in S4, material ledger allows us to also transfer the variances that have occurred on the material in different phases, like for example, a purchase variance, like a purchase price variance, or exchange rate variance, or a production variances. So all those variances can now be sent back onto the inventory, the unsold inventory, thereby actually realizing the actual cost of that material, and we are nothing but reporting a true cost of sale of that particular material or inventory. So that is one major advantage. We can actually see the true profit margins. We can see the true cost of that manufacturing of that particular material by using material ledger. Now, obviously, when there are advantages, there are also certain limitations of material ledger, which are the primary reason why not everyone really dares to implement material ledger. Or when I say they do not want to implement the functionalities of material ledger like parallel valuations or actual costings. So one such limitation is if we want to add a new currency or a valuation view to an existing setup, that means your SAP is already up and running and now you want to add a functionality of a new currency or a new valuation view to that material ledger, then it requires a huge project. It's an optimization project which adds a lot of cost and also a delay in the project implementation. So that is a huge thing. So it is always recommended to take the decision on the material ledger functionalities right at the time of implementation to save costs. Though it is possible technically to do it later point of time, but as we say, it includes a lot of time and cost. Now, though actual costing gives us the actual cost of the material, which helps us to realize the true profit margins, but implementing actual costing has its own limitation. Any material in a plant which is used for actual costing can use only standard cost as the price control. We cannot use a moving average price. Even it can be a raw material or a semi-finished goods or a finished goods. Everything should run only on the standard cost. Only then we can actually run the actual costing. And once we run the actual costing, the system changes the price control of that material to standard cost and we cannot revert it at least for 1 month. Only in the next period, if you want, you can stop running the actual costing and revert back to moving average price. So this is one limitation. So if we do not have a moving average price, we will not be able to adjust that purchase variances onto the inventory. Rather, those will be reported as a price differences, which you realize as a variance and which ultimately goes into the actual costing and then again treated as a variance going back to the material. So it's a huge process, but that is a limitation. One minor disadvantage or limitation that we're having with material ledger is many of the standard material ledger reports actually allow to view only one material at a time. So it's a bit of cumbersome if you are trying to extract reports on multiple materials. But nevertheless, the limitations of material ledger or actual costing are actually so minimal that the advantages of using these functionalities really outweighs it. And that is the reason many clients are actually now going forward to implementing the material ledger functionalities. We have been telling that there have been a lot of changes in material ledger functionality in S4. So what is one such thing which is a huge impact or huge difference compared to ERP? In S4, material ledger is now mandatory. And let us try to understand why. In ERP, you would actually implement the functionality of material ledger only if the client actually is looking forward to use actual costing. But in S4, irrespective of you make use of its functionalities, material ledger is mandatory to activate. Again, that does not mean you end up mandatorily using actual costing functionality or a parallel valuation, but even though you do not use those, it is important to have material ledger functionality implemented. Now we'll try to understand why. The first thing is the revamp that S4HANA has bought on the FICO module. It is a universal journal table. We know that a lot of aggregate tables and a lot of other tables in FI and CO module are now combined together and everything has been replaced with one single universal journal table or a single source of truth, which is the AC.A table. I'm not going into much details on the revamp that S4 has brought in the FICO module. We know that already. So, or we have videos on the channel already, those explaining this functionalities or these differences. But for now, for the scope of this video, Because of the changes that S4 has brought on the FICO module in terms of the underlying database and underlying tables, the simplification that SAP has brought, SAP has taken one wonderful decision to simplify the inventory subledger as well in line to the AC.K or the universal journal table, so that all the transactions that are happening on the inventory are also now stored on AC.K, so that we do not need to refer to multiple tables, or we need not have multiple aggregate tables to record all the inventory transactions. So that is one primary reason why S4 has made material ledger as a mandatory. Because to record all the inventory transactions in AC.K, it is mandatory for us to activate material ledger functionality, because material ledger is the base for entire inventory management. So any transactions happening on your inventory will ultimately need to be recorded in material ledger. So material ledger should work in the same way as AC.K. So it is mandatory to have material ledger activated. Here comes the question, like, why should we have material ledger as a base for all the inventory transactions, especially if we are not using the functionalities like parallel valuation or actual costing? It is because S4 wants us to give a provision to activate these functionalities in future. So for example, if you do not actually start by using the parallel valuation or actual costing when you have implemented S4HANA, but later on, if you want to activate these functionalities, in order to reduce the effort in activating these functionalities at a later point of time, it is beneficial to have material ledger already activated, all the transactions recorded on the material ledger already, so that it will be easier for us to activate these functionalities going forward. So that is the reason material ledger is the base for inventory management, and material ledger is also mandatory in order to record all the transactions on AC.K or our universal journal table. So there have been a lot of changes that have been done to the material ledger tables compared to ERP system to S4, like we see here. Material valuation tables, all the MBEW or the EW tables like EBEW or OBEW, all these tables are now replaced with AC.K. Everything that was posted on these tables, including the history tables like MBEWH or EBEWH, all those are now replaced with AC.K. Everything posts onto the universal journal table. Now, not only that, because material ledger is a separate subledger, so it also records these transactions. So all this data is also available on the material ledger tables, which are MLDOC and MLDOC CCS. We'll see what are those two. MLDOC is the material ledger document table, like how we are having a universal journal table in FICO for AC.K. Similarly, for all the material ledger documents, we have a separate ledger or a separate table as well, which is the material ledger document MLDoc. Now, how data is stored in both? Initially, the data is stored in AC.K, and there is a subtable or an extract called as AC.K underscore M underscore extract, and this extract helps to also store these data into MLDoc and MLDoc CCS tables. So many tables have now been removed or made obsolete in S4, and only AC.K and MLDoc are used. Similarly, if you see the material movement tables, typically the material movement tables store the transactions that are happening on the materials like goods receipts or goods issues, etc. So these were using MKPF and MSEG tables and other material master tables like MARC, MARD, etc., which also used to store the transaction tables, the transactions of the material. All those are also now made obsolete and consolidated into the MATDOC or the MATDoc table, which is the material ledger document table in S4. So everything is now in one single place, which is the MATDoc table. If you see the periodic tables, all these periodic tables which used to store the documents that are posted on a material level, like especially when an inventory related or a material ledger transaction is made, like for example MLHD, CR, PP, or ML CRF, ML IT, and also the summarization tables like aggregate tables like CKML HD, CKML CR, PP. All those are also now made obsolete, and all that data is stored in one single table, which is the MATDoc table in S4. Now, cost component tables. Whenever we are using any cost component structure related to the actual costing or the product cost planning, all those tables are also now being replaced with one single table, which is MLDoc CCS. CCS stands for Cost Component Structure. So Material Ledger Document Cost Component Structure Table. So MLKEPH or CKMLKEPH, all the cost component tables which were used in ERP are now replaced with one single table, which is MLDoc CCS. So when we are saying that all these tables are now replaced and made obsolete, what about the reports or something that you have built on these obsolete tables in S4? And what happens to those when you are migrating from ERP to S4? So all these tables, despite made obsolete, those are still available in S4 reverse compatibility. These tables are made as CDS views, which means these just show you the data in that view, in that format of the ERP style, but no data is actually stored by these tables. These are just a view of the underlying tables, which are either MLDoc or MLDoc CCS. So there is a reverse compatibility for majority of the tables, unlike few tables, for example, MLHD or MLIT. So these are very few tables which had no compatibility views because there has been a radical change done in the structure of these tables when moving from ERP to S4. So only these certain tables where there is no compatibility view, you might need to rebuild your reports, but otherwise majority of the ERP tables are still available as compatibility views so that you can continue using the same reports in your S4 system as well. So I'm going to stop here for the first video, and this gives us a brief about Material Ledger and how Material Ledger and what are its functionalities available in S4HANA and what are the changes on a broader view from ERP to S4 with respect to Material Ledger functionalities. Now we'll start with the subsequent videos where we will see how can we actually implement Material Ledger, its functionalities like parallel valuations. How can we eliminate intercompany profits by using a group valuation or a profit center valuation? And how can we implement actual costing, product cost planning, all that in the subsequent videos. If you're finding these videos useful, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. You can also now contribute for our work by joining our channel and becoming a member of the channel. You can get a lot of coupon codes or many other member only exclusive content if you are a member of this channel. So that will help us to create many such videos. And you can also do a one-time contribution by clicking on the thanks button below the video. That will also help us to create many such videos. So see you in the next one. Until then, take care.